Hi, I'm Joey Lott, and this is a video in the series that I call Ask Consciousness Anything. And the purpose of this series is to welcome you home to yourself. Really, it's possible just to be welcomed home, to no longer be seeking for yourself, to no longer be seeking for freedom, but to actually be welcomed home, to welcome yourself home. And what is the means by which we do this? Well, I call it self-inquiry. I sometimes call it by other names, but the simple approach is the direct approach. We don't need to do these complicated things. We don't need to do the complicated practices. They may have their time and place. They may be appropriate for certain things. But fundamentally, the most important thing, the thing that takes care of everything else, is awareness, consciousness, aliveness. That's you. And until we recognize this in our own direct experience and awaken to this and gain this greater sense of clarity on what it is that is always here supporting everything, always, then we live in anxiety because we're fixated on that frequency of anxiety and fear, and we don't realize until we turn enough and recognize who we are in enough different circumstances and situations. We don't realize until then what we've been doing. We don't realize that we have always been at choice and that we were inadvertently choosing separation. There is no such thing as separation. But there's the idea of separation. There's the belief in separation. There's the frequency of separation. And we didn't realize that we were choosing that by giving our attention to it habitually, over and over, and pretending like that was the totality. So through this process of self-inquiry, we get to discover over and over and over this blossoming clarity on what it is that's always here. And we recognize that moment to moment by recognizing what comes and goes. So there's two dimensions, two aspects, two sides to the coin of self-inquiry. One is the direct recognition of being, the direct recognition of awareness. It's possible in an instant right now, and I always invite you to check it out for yourself because the ideas don't do you a lick of good. But you can look directly for yourself and you can recognize that you are. So this is side A of the coin. To recognize in your direct experience that you are aware, that you exist, that you are conscious, that you are spacious. This is possible that you can directly recognize this. Just pause for a moment and you can recognize this. Prior to a thought, during a thought, after a thought, totally undisturbed by thought, you are. The you who you know yourself to be is the you you've always known yourself to be, always prior to thought, always here regardless of the thought. So that's the side A. Side B is that in the creative expression, aspects of ourselves are revealed, and they reveal ourself. They're reflections of ourself. Now, up until we really discover self-inquiry, until we are able to have some recognition of ourselves, we mistake all of the arisings of our life to be something other than that, because we're filtering it all through the frequency of fear, anxiety, separation. So it's like wearing glasses, that have a particular color, shade to them that tints everything. So we're filtering everything through that frequency. And it seems as though that's reality. It seems as though separation is true when we are fixated on it. But the side B of the coin is that we start to wake up and realize that everything that's happening is just a reflection pointing us to ourselves. We are aware. You can notice that everything that happens in your life, you are aware. It's all happening in your direct experience. So today's question is there an end to inquiry? And I love this question. This is a wonderful question. So thank you for asking it. I'm sure that many people have this question. And the thing to see here is where this question arises from. And if you really pause for a moment and you notice this question and where it arises from and how it arises and what its nature is, you'll start to see that this question is formulated from this frequency of fear, of separation, of time, of me and my needs and my suffering. You'll start to see that's how it's formulated. So it's actually being formulated from that frequency because we're giving attention to that frequency. It's the frequency of mind. It's a particular flavor. It's the frequency of anxiety, of fear, of worry, of separation in mind. And so we're giving our attention to that. And it seems, it's so innocent, we don't realize we're doing it. But if you slow it down, you start to see that this is what's happening. So perhaps you've received this invitation and you've inquired directly for yourself. And perhaps, regardless of whether you have, you can receive it right now. That's the beauty of this. It doesn't require, there's no real levels to this. There's no real stages to this. It's always the same inquiry, fundamentally. It's recognition of who you are. Now, it seems as though, and we can speak as though, there are levels to this because through the process of inquiry, as that inquiry comes alive, the subtleties of this, the subtleties of creation, the subtleties of who you are, the subtleties of life start to become clearer. So it seems as though there's levels. But there's no real level because the point is that no matter when you inquire, no matter what level you're at, the recognition, the possibility is always equal. It's just the recognition of yourself as you are, as you already know yourself to be. It's really just about calling off the search. This is the invitation that I received through the lineage of self-inquiry that I received this invitation in, to really call off the search. And so when we're really willing to call off the search for enlightenment, the search for betterment, the search for protection, the search for being okay, the search for peace, the search for myself, it's when we call off the search and we're willing just to be here in the aliveness of being that we discover right now, always fresh, the absolute simplicity of being. It's not something complicated. It's absolutely simple. It's made manifest in myriad ways, infinite ways. It appears very complicated, but the direct recognition reveals the absolute simplicity. There is nothing that you can do to screw this up. You can screw up complicated things, but you cannot screw up this. It's absolutely simple. Truly, absolutely simple. So as we recognize this, then what's possible is we can start to just see all of the subtleties of how the mind complicates things. Not because we need to fix them, though. This is important. We're not trying to fix the mind, but it's through the recognition and the awareness of these habits of mind that we discover our already freedom. Already freedom. So you can see that how the mind formulates this. And the tendency, the habit is usually, oh, well, I need to fix that. Oh, shame on you, mind. You're doing it wrong. But that's not the purpose here. The purpose is just to see it. And we can see that the mind wants to get something for the future, to protect itself, to be okay, to feel good, to have a sense of security, to have a sense of knowing, of control, to know where it's going, how it's going to get there, how long it's going to take, is it likely to be pleasant or unpleasant. That's the mind wants to know all these things, but you can just start to see those. And instantly in seeing them, you can recognize that you are aware and you are free. And if that's not clear to you, then just take a moment right now and be willing just to drop it all. Don't worry about how to drop it all. Just notice that it requires effort to hold on. It requires effort to grasp. But it's absolutely effortless just to drop it for a moment. And so maybe you then catch a glimpse of the effortless simplicity of being. And then you can see that movement to mind. Am I doing it? Am I getting it right? Is this working? And then mind might say, well, is there an end to inquiry? And you can tell by the flavor also. You'll start to recognize the flavor of the questions. And you'll see this flavor of this question. It's about time, effort, me doing, my ability to sustain, my ability to be successful, my concerns about my inability to be successful. How long do I have to do this? And you can see it's putting it off. How long do I have to do this? Because it's the mind imagines, and you don't need to change this. Just see it. Just see that this is the pattern. This is what the mind does. The mind is putting it off into the future, always. So it says, how long do I have to inquire? Because to the mind, it's like, oh, I got to do this again? Really? I don't want to do this. How long do I have to inquire? But before that, you can notice that you are aware, right? So instantly, as the thought arises, you are aware of the thought. In the Access Points program, it's an 8-week training in which we train you to shift your attention so that you recognize, you become absolutely, intimately familiar with that efforting to reach for a thought, to grasp for a thought, to confirm who you are in mind. And you see the futility and the pain of that. And so it becomes very, very simple. We have an access point. It's called BTT, before the thought. So instantly, in the arising of the thought, there's awareness of the thought. So the thought is actually pointing you to the direct recognition of who you are. That's why I said there's side A and side B. It's the same coin, same thing. But side A and side B. And side B is the awareness of the thought. Thought arises, sensation arises, emotion arises, experience arises. Instantly there's awareness of the thought, of the experience, awareness. It's primary. So then that question, how long do I inquire? How long do I have to inquire? Is there an end to self-inquiry? You can just you instantly recognize the flavor of it, the smell of it. And it's just really clear. I don't need to do anything with that. Because the possibility is that if you're willing to just take a look at what this is pointing you to, the arising of the thought points you to the direct recognition of yourself as awareness, already here, already being. And in this, you might even find that it's a little humorous, because you can see, possibly, that right now, if you look, you discover intimately in your own experience the truth of real freedom. Not an imagined freedom in the future, not the idea of freedom, not the circumstances and conditions that mind has invented for what freedom is supposed to look like, but the actual raw purity of total freedom now. If that's not clear to you, it's only because you're looking to a thought, comparing this experience and thought's commentary about this experience to its ideas of how it's supposed to be. So be willing just to drop that for a moment and just to notice that you are here, you are aware. All of your experience is happening and you are aware. You're not separate from it. You are aware. It is arising in you. And so, instantly, right now, if you look, there has to be a direct recognition of what I am calling freedom. It's not the mind's idea of freedom, but it is truly free. Free of the mind. Not free from the mind. The mind is welcome here too. We don't have a problem with the mind. We don't need to go to war. We can actually choose peace now. To choose peace now is to choose freedom now. It's to choose yourself now. By recognizing that everything is pointing you to discover freshly who you are. And when you see this, you see that the whole formulation of that question arising in mind is actually flawed. It's so innocent. It's like a little child who's asking in the most innocent way. So we don't need to say, bad mind, stupid mind, why would you ask such a question? No. We love, if you to have any relationship with the mind, let it be a relationship of love, of gratitude, of appreciation. But that's natural. You don't even have to force that. You don't have to try. Naturally, that's your relationship when you are recognizing yourself as you are. So the temptation is always to go back to mind to tell you if you're getting it right. And then mind will always do what it does, which is it's going to separate, it's going to label, it's going to invent problems and try to solve the problems. That's what it does. So if you imagine it's going to do otherwise, you'll be disappointed. But if you just tell the truth in your actual experience, you'll see that's what mind does. That's its function. We're just giving label of mind to a particular function. It's a very useful function. It helps the body-mind survive. That's why I often say these spiritual practices that have the pretense that you're going to get rid of your mind are absolutely insane. We don't need to get rid of it. It's divinely perfect. It's already fine. It's just that you don't need to keep looking there to have confirmation about who you are. It's like the fire is fine. But if you keep sticking your hand in the fire, you'll keep getting burned. The fire is wonderful. The fire offers us warmth. It offers us light. It offers us so much. But if we keep sticking our hand in it, it's the wrong use. So here we just start to wake up to that. If you keep sticking your hand in the fire and you never become aware of that, and you continue to just la 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 la, I don't know what's going on, then you'll keep suffering because you'll keep feeling like a victim. You stick your hand in the fire, you get burned, and then you feel like, I'm such a victim. I can't believe this is happening to me again. But when you wake up and recognize what you're doing, then you're empowered. You can choose. You don't have to be a victim. You can't be a victim. You were just ignorant of this before. But when you look in your direct experience, you see and recognize the choice moment to moment. And that's why this question is so wonderful, is because this shows one of the last ditch efforts to undermine, right? To say, okay, but how long do I have to do this? What's the goal? When will I arrive? And you can just start to recognize that that's also pointing you to just take a look right now and see who's aware. You are. And so is there an end to self-inquiry? I couldn't say. I do not experience an end to self-inquiry. What I do experience is an end to suffering. What I do experience is an end to ignorance. I do experience that there's an end to avoidance. Because what's possible now, always now, this is so important. Don't put it off. Never put it off. It's always now. Always. Receive the invitation now. No matter what you think you know. No matter how advanced you think you are or how non-advanced you think you are. It's always now. The invitation is so simple. It's the same invitation for advanced or beginner. Right now. Give up all idea of advanced or beginner and just notice in your own direct experience what's here. And so the idea that inquiry is something that you have to do is common. It begins that way. Many people find that they have to set an alarm on their phone in order to remember to do the inquiry. In Access Points, the Access Points program, we have 5 simple yet profoundly powerful access points. These are, like I described, BTT, before the thought. Now, we take an hour to activate that so you have crystal clarity about how to apply it in life when you go through the Access Points program. But in this short amount of time, I've described to you the essence of it to recognize, and you can just start to check it out. Just look in your own life, and you'll see. Now, it's not usually going to be as fast or as direct or as efficient as having the hour-long activation and getting this daily support through the Access Points program. That's extremely powerful. It works very, very quickly and very powerfully for people. But nonetheless, this is absolutely accessible to everybody. If you are ready, if you're on fire, this is not a complicated process. The main thing and the reason that people don't get the results without the support is because they don't do it, right? So the support offers a couple of things. The support allows for, number one, hugely, accountability. You have to be willing to inquire. If you have the accountability, most people inquire. Without the accountability, not so much. Just got to tell the truth. Now, if you're one of those people and you're on fire and you just, maybe your life is such that you've really reached that point. Like I reached in my life where it became crystal clear. I've run out of options. I had reached a dead end. There was the intensity of the suffering was too great for me to continue down that path of misery, of avoidance, of trying, of effort, of fixing, of solving. Couldn't do that anymore. So if that's your life, then that's blessedly so, because that means that you can't do anything else. You have been forced into a corner where you finally have to be willing to take a look. It's like you've been looking everywhere else and you say, no, I don't want to look. And finally, you have to look. And that's such a gift. It can be terrifying, but it's such a gift because it really ends the nonsense. It ends the putting it off into the future. And it makes it so clear that it's now. You must inquire now. What we see, what I see is that a lot of people who are not quite at that level of intensity or fear or terror or end of the line, they are greatly supported by the accountability, daily accountability for 8 weeks to inquire. With that level of support, it just works. It works for everybody. So You can see, though, that initially, like, people set the alarm 5 times a day to inquire. It's a very simple process. You do it in life, doesn't require a lot of time, but you have to do it. And initially it seems like a doing, and a lot of people who are attracted to my work, they are too caught up in non-dual philosophy often, and so they struggle with this. But you don't have to struggle. You can just take my word for it. Trust me, and take a look. Try it out for yourself. Inquire minimum of 5 times a day in your life, and just look to see. Every time you inquire, anytime there's intensity, anytime there's struggle, anytime there's efforting, anytime there's any sense of suffering, just inquire. And how do you inquire? Well, there are lots of ways. There are lots of angles. But fundamentally, all of them are offering you just the simple invitation to recognize that you are. Just to pause and recognize that you are, or you are aware. If you do that repeatedly, consistently, you will discover that this inquiry actually comes alive. So that's what I wanted to point out, is that it seems initially like a doing, like you have to set the alarm. But the reason for that is only because we have the momentum of the habit of a lifetime of avoidance, the momentum of a lifetime of fixating on a particular frequency of thought, a momentum of a lifetime of habit of suffering. And because of that habit and that momentum, it's like you got an avalanche, or a rock slide. There's a momentum there. So only a fool would go hang out under the rock slide and say, no, it would be too much effort for me to move. Too much effort for me to actually look. It'd be too much effort. I'm just going to pretend like the momentum of the rock slide should not result in me being crushed by the rock slide. But see, that's insane. And so we can start to see, if we're willing to trust, if you're willing to trust in me and what I'm telling you, then you do just set the alarm 5 times a day and inquire. Really honestly inquire, just not as a thought, not to arrive at a state, not to get an answer in mind, but just to notice your direct experience of yourself prior to thought. To notice that prior to, during, and after every thought, you are aware. Now, to the mind, this seems stupid, pointless, like it couldn't possibly work, and it seems like effort. But my promise to you is that you do this consistently, and what you will start to notice is that it comes alive in you, and it is not effort. What it reveals is the effort that you had to make in order to continue to indulge that habit. So the momentum of the lifetime is there's a habit, but we actually are active, albeit largely unconscious participants in that. So it's not being done to us. There's a habit, there's a momentum, but we are choosing that moment to moment. When we're unconscious of that, we continue to choose the same thing, the same fixation, the same frustration, the same anxiety, the same fear, over and over and over. And we either resist it or we indulge it. And it shows up in all these different guises, and we always like to pretend like, oh no, it's different. It's the same. It's the same fixation because of that habit, and we're doing it. We're choosing it. So the opportunity is to allow that inquiry to come alive in you so that you start to become aware of your voluntary participation, your choosing of this. As you become aware of that, you get to choose to allow yourself to be at rest rather than indulging the fixation on that which you do not want. See, that's the thing, is none of us wants to be living from fear. Nobody wants that. But we choose it over and over and over. And we don't realize that it makes no difference whether we're choosing it in a positive way or a negative way, right? We could indulge fear and say, yeah, I'm going to be so fearful. Or we can indulge fear by cowering and hiding and saying, oh, no, I don't want fear. I got to avoid fear. No matter what we do, though, as long as we're engaging with it, as long as we're fixating on that frequency and in training to that frequency, we're going to get more of that. So you can start to see the insanity of that. But as we awaken through self-inquiry and discover that all of that effort that we've been unconsciously putting into fixating on that and sustaining that which we do not like in the first place, we recognize that we have a choice. And that choice is to simply rest as you are, to be yourself rather than trying to be something else. You can see that we spend most of our lives trying to be lovable, trying to be worthy, trying to be acceptable, trying to be good enough, trying to be smart enough, attractive enough, to have knowledgeable enough, experienced enough. We're always putting it off into the future. Our okayness is always off in the future. And we start to wake up to what we're doing, how we're doing that. And so as that shift happens, where the inquiry starts to come alive, what we notice is that actually the inquiry is effortless. The momentum of the habit of fixation on that thought, that pattern, that mode, that requires effort. And so we start to naturally just be more and more at rest. So the inquiry becomes effortless. It is effortless, but it reveals its effortlessness to us. But that doesn't mean that the inquiry ceases, because the inquiry is the aliveness, is the awareness that you are. The inquiry is the creative expression of your soul, the desire to know yourself in your joy. So only the mind would want to put an end to that. Only the mind, because the mind is afraid. But let the mind be afraid. Be the anchor that allows the mind to finally receive the fear. Be the anchor as you are. Be the anchor as awareness, as spaciousness, to stabilize that, to give it what it's always been looking for. It's always felt cut off and unsupported and insecure because we were looking to it rather than it looking to us. We're saying, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And the mind is growing all the more fearful because it's saying, oh my God, you don't know who you are? This is really bad news. I don't know who I am either. So then there's this anxiety. But to be the anchor in the recognition of who you are as consciousness frees the mind. The mind is no longer needing to do this impossible task to tell you who you are, to define who you are. It's free to finally be what it is supposed to be. The vehicle for creative expression, the vehicle for the expression of joy. So, does self-inquiry have an end? Not that I'm aware of. We could also ask the same question, does life have an end? Not that I'm aware of. So thank you for this question. I hope that this response has been helpful to you. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you can go to joeylott.com/ask. That's JOEYLOTT.com/ask. And if you have interest in my current events or working with me to get direct coaching, you can go to joeylott.com/now, NOW. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.